What if Ahsoka was the Chosen One? Part 4. The majority of the Jedi, including Master T and Ahsoka, went back to Coruscant once Geonosis was secured. Once there, her master along with the rest of the Jedi High Council were in constant meetings with the Republic officials. Though she didn't know the details, it was obvious it was about the war that was somehow started on Geonosis. There seemed to be constant news of joint invasions, or planets and systems seen from the Republic, and joining what came to be known as a confederacy of independent systems. However, even though her master was too busy to sleep, there was nothing for Ahsoka to do. She hated inaction, but it was especially bad this time. It left her with too much time to think about what she had miraculously survived on Geonosis. What she had survived while countless others did not. One massive funeral service had taken place a few days after for all the fallen Jedi. Most of the remains have been cremated, though a few have been placed in caskets. Their final resting place is now under the Jedi Temple, and their lightsabers are all that were left to remember them. She fortunately hadn't known any of them well. The one she had known best was Master Trevor, probably just from the times they had conversed with her master. However, the face she couldn't get out of her head was that of the human Jedi. She had flown the same shuttle as him, seen him alive, then had seen him dead. He was the only one of the deceased she had seen up close, and she couldn't forget his lifeless eyes. Ahsoka pretended that this didn't affect her and just focused on her training. Since Master T and Plo, along with the rest of the High Council, were busy, and Master Jol was focused on the Jedi Temple security, Ahsoka had to mainly train alone. She understood that her master had responsibilities, but it felt like she had recently spent more time away from her master than by her side. After everything that had happened over the past year, her bond with Master T was filled with doubt and uncertainty. Ahsoka didn't tell anyone this or let it show. Her master's reasoning and logic were sound, so it was only her feelings getting in the way, and a Jedi shouldn't let their emotions control them. Within a month, the meeting seemed to end, and Ahsoka returned to her master's side. Though the Chancellor and many others wanted the Jedi to lead the newly emerged clone army, because they didn't know how, the Jedi Council had instead agreed upon being advisors. Master T took Ahsoka with her when she was immediately sent to Kamino to learn more about the clone army. Once there, Ahsoka found it fascinating, albeit a bit disturbing how the clones were created, raised, and trained. The Kaminoans were practically emotionless in their operations, and the facility was unnervingly clean and white. She didn't particularly care to meet any of the Kaminoans, and her master seemed to sense her restlessness. So after the preliminary introductions and tour, Master T let her go mingle amongst the clones. The clones around Kamino were of varying ages, from toddlers to grown men, and how they trained in combat caught her interest. She had seen it demonstrated in action after all. They only stayed on Kamino for a day and a half before leaving to meet up with a clone unit that was fighting on Daegu. That battle was Ahsoka's first real taste of actual combat, as she followed her master into the fray. Though they were technically advisors, and couldn't command the clones, the High Council had stressed that they shouldn't hesitate to instead help them. On Daegu, this is exactly what she and Master T did. Ahsoka had to suppress her anxiety and fear at the prospect of charging droids. Petronarchy Arena was so recent and vivid in her mind, but she managed. Within a few days, they successfully liberated Daegu from the Separatists. Afterwards, she learned that the clones actually looked up to her and her master. They admired their ability to face oncoming fire and walk through it, though they still didn't understand why they didn't wear armor. She also learned that just as the clones on Kamino were referred to by numbers, these ones were too. It unnerved her, and she hated calling them by a number, so she casually tried to suggest names that they could use. They told her they would think about it, but she didn't hear their decision. First thing the next morning, she and Master T were sent to another clone unit. They spent the next year doing just that, moving between clone units, and Ahsoka became familiar with many of them. The clones were able to successfully fight against a massive droid army, but there was a common thing every clone commander in general mentioned. The droid army vastly outnumbered them, so why had they overwhelmed them? Why were they instead engaging minimal forces in long battles of attrition, or abandoning units and reinforcing them? Because of the Battle of Geonosis, Ahsoka understood what they were talking about. Even the Jedi could be overwhelmed by numbers, and Count Dooku had seen that. So why wasn't he using that tactic against the clones? Still, nobody knew the reason, so they just focused on the task at hand. The war was going well anyway, so why would someone want to jinx it? Though there are many slogs that are still ongoing, most of the battles are quick affairs that usually result in a Republic victory, with thankfully limited clone fatalities. The worst defeats for the Republic came at the hands of a lightsaber-wielding cyborg creature known as General Grievous, and a Sith whose name was Ventress. Whenever they appeared, teams of Jedi were sent out to confront them. Occasionally, Master T was part of it, but she never brought Ahsoka along. When this happened, she was usually left with the clone unit or in the temple on Coruscant. Whether Master T was part of these teams or not, Ahsoka also sometimes went on missions without her. At first, she feared these, but eventually she became comfortable fighting alone alongside the clones, especially since she didn't have to worry about advising them. Master T rarely did as well. They mostly let the clones do their thing, while they assisted them where needed. The only thing that Master T advised the clones about was political targets, avoiding unnecessary damage or civilian casualties. If the clone unit she was with had downtime, Ahsoka usually talked with his leaders, asking them to teach her about leadership, combat, and tactics. Though the Jedi weren't really supposed to be taking part in combat, because the Vices didn't do that, almost all the Jedi usually accompanied the clones into battle. They often were either the spirit of the attack, a diversion, or an infiltration party that sabotaged the droid staging area. Ambushes were also an occasional occurrence when they were traveling between destinations. Though Ahsoka did enjoy being on lush planet surface, during battle, she always preferred flying her starfighter. Flying it, she felt freer and safer than she ever had, all while demonstrating her innate ability to fly. Whenever she got a chance, which was usually offered because of her talent, she took it. On her own downtime, she did question why the Jedi were involved in this war though. The Jedi were peacekeepers, and though it could be argued they still were, since they were only technically advising, she and her master were again doing more fighting than advising. Several Jedi had also already lost their lives over the past year fighting as well. None of it made sense to her, but she was too scared to speak up. Though she had impulsively spoken her mind past the window, and it had gone well, she didn't want to try again. Though combat unsettled her, she was fine being away from the politics that had engulfed her life before this. Being a High Council member's Padawan though, meant politics was still something that she had to deal with. Most of the advisors' roles they were sent to do had political support, or the planet was of political interest. It was tolerable since they rarely spent hours in meetings like they had before on Coruscant. Instead, Master T usually was informed remotely after the debates. During times they did go back to Coruscant and had to meet with political officials, Chancellor Palpatine was always there. Though he still felt off, she had gotten used to him by now, along with his interest in her. In fact, she started to enjoy sharing her recent activities with him, while her master talked with officials. This all soon became a comfortable routine for Ahsoka. So, it wasn't at all unusual when Chancellor Palpatine approached her one morning. When he said he wanted to talk with her away from prying eyes, she didn't even argue as he guided her to his office and showed her around. He pointed out artifacts that were scattered around his office and told her their origin, but Ahsoka started to get a sinking feeling. Most of the artifacts were somehow related to the Sith. Why did he have them? She couldn't bring herself to ask this or anything else, scared of the answer or the potential of losing her conversation partner. However, perhaps taking her silence as an interest, he moved away from the artifacts and started talking just about the Sith and their abilities. Everything she had told him, her fears, worries, and anxieties she felt, he now told her Sith ways to use those emotions, or to overcome them. Ahsoka suddenly remembered what Anakin told her just months ago. He had started out on one of the rare instances she was in the temple. He told her that Chancellor Palpatine had once tried befriending him when he was younger, but then the Chancellor suddenly started ignoring him like nothing had happened. Anakin hadn't thought much of it until he heard from his former master that Chancellor Palpatine was now interested in and trying to get close with Ahsoka. She had proceeded to ignore what he had said then, perhaps feeling jealous that he had also received similar attention from Chancellor Palpatine, but now his words wouldn't leave her. Mulling over what he said and what Chancellor Palpatine was currently saying, she talked just enough to feign interest before their conversation inevitably had to end. On her way back to the Jedi Temple, she contemplated what to do. Should she tell someone that he sounded like a Sith, or should she keep quiet and stick to her stable life? When she was almost back to her room, she literally ran to a group of younglings that were playing in the hall. They apologized for her, they quickly scattered, but it was enough. Turning around, she went in search of her master. She found Master T conversing with Master Windu, and though hesitantly, she confided both of them about what Anakin had told her, how Chancellor Palpatine had been treating her, and what he had just told her. They both confirmed they had also been suspicious of Chancellor Palpatine with his actions first towards Anakin and then her. However, with what he had just told her, Master Windu believed that this just confirmed that he was the Sith Lord they were looking for, and it was time to act. He started rounding up a strike team, and miraculously, he permitted Ahsoka to be part of it upon her request. They used a single shuttle to get to the executive building, where they went to the Chancellor's office. When they walked through the door, Chancellor Palpatine was alone, sitting behind his desk and gazing out of the galactic city skyline. Master Windu didn't hesitate in igniting his lightsaber and telling him to surrender himself. Chancellor Palpatine just chuckled, telling him that there was nothing they could do. Chancellor Palpatine was then flying towards them, and Ahsoka registered the surge of the Force too late. Their distance to each other remained the same as she was thrown back before her senses vanished as she smacked into the wall head first. Pain lanced its way through her. The sharp pain was the only thing that was there for a moment, until it faded to the throb. When it did, her sight was the first thing that came back, but as her vision cleared, she saw bodies everywhere. Slain Jedi littered the room, but there was thankfully still a fight taking place. Chancellor Palpatine's back was to her as he fought the remaining Jedi, including Master Windu. At that moment, she felt compelled to act. Doubt filled her, making her shake. She found one of her lightsabers, but she smothered with every emotion she was currently feeling, before gingerly standing and creeping forward. Having to fight alongside the clones, she had learned where the organs were in a human body and hoped to save a clone's life one day. Now, she was planning to use that knowledge to try and take one. Having gone close enough to the fight that seemed to have turned into a battle of wills, she ignited a lightsaber and surged forward, thrusting her lightsaber into the back of Chancellor Palpatine. A guttural noise escaped them as she quickly pulled out her lightsaber and retreated, unsure if her aim was true. However, he promptly collapsed to the ground, not even a breath escaping him as his body hit the floor. His head was slightly turned, making one of his eyes slightly visible, and it was how she confirmed that he was dead. She had seen too many lifeless eyes not to know what they looked like. A firm hand on her shoulder was the only thing that stopped her from looking at the body, and she looked up to see her master. A tight smile was on her face, but she didn't say anything to Ahsoka. Somberly but quickly, they tended to the slain Jedi in Chancellor Palpatine's body. As they started to leave the office, they found clones in the hallway running towards them. The leading Jedi went to greet them, but without hesitation, the clones were firing at them. The first two Jedi didn't have time to ignite the lightsabers before their bodies were riddled with blaster bolts, but the rest of the Jedi ignited theirs and started defending themselves. Instead of deflecting shots back at the clones like the other Jedi, Ahsoka deflected the shots into the walls. She couldn't understand why they were attacking them, but she didn't want to kill the men she had become so familiar with. With the clones attacking them, the plans apparently changed. They left the slain Jedi behind, only bringing the lightsabers and Chancellor Palpatine's body. They fought their way back to the shuttle where they quickly boarded and took off. An exclamation came from the pilot a moment later, and everyone shrugged a look at what he had seen. When Ahsoka finally caught a glimpse, the whispers on the other Jedi had already told her. The Jedi temple was on fire with black smoke billowing from it. The temple was under attack. The pilot skillfully but quickly got them into the temple hangars, where the interrupted skirmish was taking place between a unit of clones and several of the temple guards with a few of the Jedi. The surviving members of the Jedi strike team immediately threw themselves at the clones into the temple's defense. The battle to defend the temple lasted for several days, during which an investigation began as to why the clones turned against them, along with talks with the Senate. Though Ahsoka didn't know everything that was said, she knew that the Senate was furious that the Jedi had killed Chancellor Palpatine, and many thought the clones' turn against him was justified. She didn't have the time or energy to think about any of this, as she and the rest of the able-bodied Jedi were constantly fighting new clone reinforcements that came to try and take the temple. They were ordered simply to subdue the clones if possible, but many Jedi just didn't care to, killing them without a second thought. Ahsoka happily followed the orders, but it was difficult, and she found herself in many precarious situations. It wasn't for a few more days that Ahsoka heard the reason the clones had turned against them. Each clone was created with something in their head that forced them to follow orders, regardless of their will or emotions, and they had been ordered to kill the Jedi by Chancellor Palpatine. The Jedi Council was working on getting this order rescinded with a new temporary Chancellor, and though many in the Republic didn't want this to happen, it eventually did. The only reason for this was because, with the clones focusing their efforts on killing Jedi, The Separatists are pushing the attack and making rapid progress. There's the catch to this agreement though, one that Ahsoka only learned as it took place. One the compromise reached in return for rescinding the order was that the Jedi who had landed the killing blow to Chancellor Palpatine, the one that was credited with killing him, would be arrested. This was explained to Ahsoka as non-clone Republic units arrived in the temple to arrest her. She was too shocked to argue or resist, as even her master passively watched her being led out of the temple in forced restraints. As weeks passed though, she had nothing to do but process this. Ahsoka felt like the air had been knocked out of her. Why had the council, why had her master so readily agreed to this? Any one of them could have taken the fall. It would have been believable. Why had they given her over? She was the chosen one. Was that why? Had the council deemed that she was no longer useful now that she had fulfilled the prophecy by killing the Sith Lord? She knew that she was overthinking everything, but as the days passed, days that could only be distinguished by the when her meals were brought, her theories and fears seemed all the more true. Over time, Ahsoka saw more and more clones amongst the guards. Though many seemed to ignore her or even hostile, there are a few that were nice. These clones were the only ones that talked to her, and they kept her up to date on the events happening outside. The Separatists had seen stunning success initially during the confusion, but the Republic was able to halt their advance. This was soon followed by several Jedi strike teams being sent out to specifically hunt and either kill or capture the leaders of the CIS, including the military leaders. Ventress and Grievous had already been killed along with several others, with many more captured. Many of the mercenary generals also had left as soon as they realized that they were also targets of these Jedi strike teams. Count Dooku remained elusive for some time, but around in the upper levels of CIS were eliminated, and the collective movement crumbled. Many worlds and systems took this chance to sign a peace with the Republic, while another faction inside the CIS was also trying to broker a larger peace that would leave them independent. Then, finally, a Jedi strike team was able to catch up to and capture Count Dooku. This almost immediately led to a ceasefire between the Republic and the CIS. Within a week after this, Ahsoka was finally released from prison. It was only because of Count Dooku's testimony and the evidence found that showed that Chancellor Palpatine was behind the war and that Count Dooku was following his every order. However, even after being released and her things returned to her, no Jedi came for her. In the end, she had to accept the right offered to her by a few clones. Arriving at the temple, she learned that most of the High Council was with the new Chancellor, discussing the fate of the Jedi Order. The only Jedi that welcomed her were Anakin and Reva, the latter of which now being a knight. Having already put on her a cool headdress and her Padawan braid, which had been taken from her when she was locked up, as soon as she got to her room, she promptly removed them again. Master Yi didn't return to the temple until after the sun had set, and that was with the entire High Council. They made a show of praising and thanking her, even saying that they believed this had been her great trial, and she was now ready to become a knight. None of this was what she wanted to hear. None of this was an apology. None of them asked if she was alright. Ignoring the rest of the council, she turned to her master and asked if she had ever thought of protecting her when she had been dragged out of the temple like a criminal, when she had been confined to a plain white room for months. Master Yi appeared taken back, but quickly responded that of course she had, and had worried about her the whole time. Though she exuded tenderness, Ahsoka had known her long enough to see beyond it. There was no emotion to her words. Trembling, Ahsoka gently grabbed Master Yi's hand and placed her Padawan braid and a cool headdress in it. She whispered a single goodbye before she turned and walked out of the temple. Plo caught up to her before she could reach the stairs. Without turning, she bluntly told him that she wasn't changing her mind. He told her he understood and apologized for failing to protect her. She remained silent, so he continued, speaking of her mother. He told her her name, what village she was in, and his coordinates. When he told her that he was telling her this because her mother had made him promise to do so, she couldn't hold back her tears. He gave her a short hug and sipped her bag credits and, after murmuring a final apology, he quietly faded back into the darkness. Ahsoka wasted no time getting a fight to Chili. Once there, using both the coordinates from Plo and the village name, she searched for the village. It took days as, without her own transportation, she had to make the trek on foot. However, soon, a village appeared amidst a dense forest. After she verified it was the one she was looking for, She inquired about her mother. This was interrupted when someone hesitantly called her name. Turning, she saw an older female Togruta that bore a striking resemblance to her. Instinctively, she knew that this was her mother, and tears flowed freely down both her cheeks as they closed the distance and locked in an embrace.